a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And yes. And what about on the substitutes?
Yeah, can we hold a second? Okay, I'll make a motion on the requisitions.
Second?
And yes. Do you have anything else?
That's all I have.
Very good. Mr. Roush, good morning. We have a public hearing, continuation of a hearing to consider increases to the water and sewer rates, fees, and charges for 24, 25, and 26.
Yes, we met, I think it was, last time we met was January 30th, a month ago, where we presented our rates, proposed rates for the next 3 years. We had a nice discussion on that, and I think we continued the public hearing, which is what we're doing now. And I have a couple slide presentations, a couple slides to go over, to again, talk about the rates. I think when we were here last time, I think Commissioner Jones, you had a comment about our sewer rate and about whether we have enough margins to continue on, because we're obviously struggling right now with the rates where we're spending a little bit more than we're taking in. So we ran some additional analysis based off of a suggestion of taking a look at that rate, because it was a declining rate. And so we looked at a rate as if we continued with 7% across the board. And that's some of the slides we're showing today. And then also, so that was based off the last meeting. And then we also had the question last time we met in regards to the current developments that are on the books right now, and whether those current developments could be grandfathered in. So we wanted to talk about that also. And we've got a couple of the developers here from the Home Builders Association here representing the home builders today that would probably like to get up and have some comments and give their input also. So we had continual meetings since over the last month with the Home Builders Association, and based off of that, we've drafted a resolution that hopefully will meet the needs of the home builders and Warren County. So just a quick reminder of, when we came in here in January, these were the rates that we presented. These are the user rates. These are the rates that we charge our customers every month. This is what we're proposing for the next 3 years. We're proposing a base water fee of $5 per bill, a user rate of $5.05 in 2024. That would go up by 7.5% in 2025 to $5.43 per 1,000 gallons. And then in 2026, it would go up by 5% to $5.70. That's the water rates that we're proposing. On the sewer rates, we're asking for a base fee of $2.50 per bill, and that would go for the next 3 years. And then we're asking for a rate of 7% increase this year in 2024, 5% in 2025, and 3% in 2026. That's what we presented last month. And again, these are what the impacts it has on our revenue and our projections and expense projections. So in 2023, that's where we had the deficit, where we spent more last year than we took in. With the rates that we're proposing, we'll slightly more than break even in 2024. In 2025, we'll probably have estimated around a $470,000 surplus, and then 2026, you see that surplus increase when we eventually stop purchasing water from Cincinnati Water Works.
Okay, and
Or
at that
reduce-
point, you're gonna come in and ask us to reduce these things? These rates?
We can have those discussions after 2026, yeah, when that
But
happens.
in
we can
this,
have-
you're projecting, we actually had a deficit in 2023.
Yes, we had a deficit in 2023.
So
That's
when it
probably
says
the first
projected,
time.
that's why, okay, yeah, but why does it say projected? Why wouldn't you know at this point?
This graph was produced in October.
Okay, can you
So-
give us the actual numbers now?
Those actual numbers are, you'll see that in 3 pages down here.
Okay.
You know,
Great.
in the next couple in the next couple of slides, we'll show what those actually were.
Okay,
So when we presented in January, they were based off of, numbers that we were
Yeah,
running in October,
okay.
November.
you just tell us what the real thing,
Yeah.
you're gonna show us what really happened.
Yes. So this is the water side, then on the sewer side, this is the impact of the projections, with those rate increases. We had a deficit again in 2023 on the sewer side. And then 2024, 25, and 26, with these projections, we have slight surpluses of somewhere around $130,000 to $160,000. And that's the comment you noticed, Commissioner Jones. So going back, to try to improve those surpluses, we went back and looked at a slightly different rate structure where this is where you see on the bottom, everything above that last line is the same. Everything on the bottom, that last line, which is the rate increase for the sewers, we looked at instead of a 7%, 5%, and 3%, we looked at 7% across the board. And this is the change that you see in the rates, where by 2026, with that rate increase, we actually have roughly around a $500,000 increase or surplus in 2026. So we do see an impact if we increase the sewer rate slightly. It does help us towards the back end of that planning period. So, wanted to give you just a quick analysis. And,
So I'm waiting to hear what our actual deficit was. Did you say that
Okay,
you were gonna get that?
the actual deficit,
2023.
on the sewer side was, the difference there that you saw, circled in black. And I don't actually have the number in front of me, but it was roughly, Michael, do you have it? $600,000.
And how
That was
much,
on the sewer side.
and obviously, based upon,
Water side was 725.
okay, and then we had a surplus in every previous year, so I take it that was paid out of our surplus, right?
That's correct.
And how much was our surplus before we had that deficit?
The surplus, that's where we pull all our capital projects out of, and it's a rolling number. Every year it changes because we've got a very aggressive capital project going
Okay.
on.
So what was our surplus in
It was
2023?
probably- Michael, do you have those numbers? It was probably in the $10 million range or something like that on the sewer side, or the water side,
9.6.
9.6.
9.6, is that for both or for water? and
That's
sewer?
just the water
So
side,
combined or both?
just on the water side.
Water, and what was it for sewer?
Sewer side, we've got probably closer to, is it $30 million?
We got 26.
$26 million.
That's what I remember was 26 from the capital
So
presentation.
keep in mind, we've got some very large capital
Yeah.
No,
projects.
I know,
that
I
are
know,
on
I'm
the
just
books.
asking for the, believe me, I just wanna know the numbers. And as of right now, what's our current balances today? Or,
It's probably, as far as the surplus
We're
side,
getting ready to
it's,
close out February soon, so, I can,
well, do you know what it is at the end of January?
it's probably very similar. Those are probably numbers that you're giving close to the end of January. It's probably on the water side, it's probably $10 million in surplus for the
I
capital
can go
projects.
over and check it, I got the spreadsheet.
Okay.
over there.
It doesn't fluctuate a ton, but
Right.
it's probably, on the books right now, we probably have $10 million on the water side and $26 million on the sewer side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yep.
So, it's still, with those rate increases, with the proposed rate increases, we're looking at, still being in that top tier of the least cost provider on the water. And this is based off the survey that Piqua puts out every year, the city of Piqua puts out. We typically, in the area, in the water providers in this general region, in our region here, we're like the third, fourth, or fifth least expensive water provider.
Where will we be once we raise our rates?
That's what you see in the orange. So you see two bars there. You see the yellow, which was 2023, and then the orange is the rate for 2024, if
Okay.
we go with those rates.
Why did you pick 22,500 gallons?
Because that's how the city of Piqua does their survey, to try to standardize all the different municipalities, because they all have different rate structures, they all bill on different period, different quantities. Some bill on 100 gallons, some bill on 1,000 gallons, some bill on cubic feet. So they used it, city of Piqua standardized on 22,500 gallons.
Is
for
the
a
average
3-month
households
period.
doing that in a
Yeah,
3-month period?
that's pretty standard, yes.
Okay. So what you're reporting to us is kind of an average usage over a 3-month period?
Mhm.
And that's the comparison point, and the numbers are actually what you would spend based upon that average usage of
Yes,
22,500.
based off of an estimated average usage of 22,500 gallons per 3
And the
months.
but the sewer rate and the water rate is based upon that same 22,500 number?
Yes, so if you look at the next slide, that's the sewer rate, and it's based off the same metric at 22,500.
But of course, you don't, well, we had make an adjustment, how do we make an adjustment for our sewer charges and rates in the summer when people are using outside water that doesn't go into the sewer system?
We have, our billing software, considers the fact that a large number of our customers use irrigation for their yards, and washing cars, and a lot of that water does not return to our sewer system.
Right,
So our billing software caps that summer usage. So it looks at your historical winter usage, where we're getting all the flow back, and then it caps, and based off of that winter usage, it calculates a factor to that, and it caps off a certain usage in the summer.
so it does.
So if you normally use 6,000 gallons a month during the winter, and then your usage goes to 50,000 during the summer because you irrigate, it caps that 50,000. It doesn't bill to 50,000, it bills to the 6,000 times 175%.
What is it, an average rate you take during the winter months?
It's
or-
the average rate during the winter months, so it looks at like 3 months, 4 months during the winter, creates an average, and then adds a factor to that and caps it.
So in other words, it actually adds a factor by going above that, but
Because
not very much.
people's use during the summer does increase.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you're hot, or you're taking more showers, or
Yep.
whatever, but people have pools, they have irrigation, they're washing their cars outside, and what you're doing is you're taking a winter average, and then you're multiplying it by 1 point something, like 1.1 or something.
1.75.
Okay,
yes.
1.75, okay, thank you.
And then
And we
it
did that a
caps
long
it.
time ago, right? I mean.
It's
we-
been
we
that
knew
way,
this.
yes,
Yeah.
for decades, so, yeah. So on the sewer side, we don't lose a whole lot of ground on the survey based with the rate increases that we're proposing. And this assumes that nobody else,
Yeah, I was gonna say, and this is assuming we don't know what anybody else's rates are
Right.
gonna do for 2024 fiscal year, so we might very well be in the same position. Worst case is we drop one spot.
right, that's correct.
One of the things I'm curious about, why aren't we including in this chart more of our, I see Springboro, Lebanon, and Mason.
And
Are those,
Franklin.
and Franklin. Are there any, is there any place else that has a separate service than those?
Well, we've listed them here. So, when you look at the Piqua survey, oh my gosh, it's 60 entities.
I guess my
And
question
instead
is
of looking
this.
at all those 60 entities throughout, southern Ohio, we focused on just the areas, our competitors around this area.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. So by looking at Springboro, Mason, Lebanon, and Franklin, does that basically cover all the people in Warren County that have a separate water system or sewer charge system than ours.
Well, there's a small area up in Middletown, and I don't know if Monroe's in here, Monroe.
It is.
So
is it Monroe? I
it's
didn't see it.
typically Mason, Springboro, Lebanon. Loveland touches the very southern portion of the county. You have Carlisle, you have, yeah, that's essentially it. Western Water, I don't know, do we put Western Water on here? Probably not, but Western Water, they would be at the very, unfortunately, you know, they'd be further down on the chart,
They're on there, on the water side, they're on
on
there.
the water side. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we don't have the water slide. Oh, there it is. So Western Water's on there also. They're in the middle of the chart.
And Hamilton is the city of Hamilton, not Hamilton County, since you didn't.
City of Hamilton, that's correct. So,
So I mean, the difference between, say, on the sewer side, when you look at these, when you look at the actual absolute number, so we're gonna be at $116 for 22,500. And there's, I mean, the Yellow Springs is like more than double that. And in fact, we're way lower, but in terms of, and we're, it appears that we're way lower than Mason. I mean, significantly lower. I mean, Mason's $146, Lebanon's $147, Franklin's $170. So I think that the takeaway from this is even with the increases, we are still substantially lower than other cities and jurisdictions in Warren County, substantially lower. And in fact, they may be increasing their rates.
that's, yes, I anticipate probably every entity is gonna increase their rates based off the economic conditions that are going on nowadays.
Pretty much every entity does what we do is a predictable billing cycle where it's a 2 or 3 year schedule, correct?
They-
Where they'll set the rates for some period of time. You go back 2 or 3 years, and the inflationary pressures that were literally pressed upon the entire nation out of policies out of DC clearly affected every aspect of the economy, and you were not exempt. So our water and sewer department, the things that we used to buy for, why don't you give an example of like what we spend on chemicals today versus what, I mean, it's through the roof, isn't it?
Back in January, we presented that, and those items have increased significantly. You know, the chemical costs, when we go purchase chemicals, those costs have gone up. The disposing of our biosolids in the landfill, the tipping fees have gone up significantly. The electrical cost, you know, continues to go up. Everything that you purchase, everything we purchase has gone up significantly.
And every time we lay or replace a new linear foot of pipe, that cost has gone up significantly, correct?
Yes, it used to be we would estimate, like, to replace a 8-inch line, it used to be we would estimate like $80 or $60 a foot to replace an 8-inch water line. Now it's like $85, $90 a foot to replace a water line.
Crystal's on it, she has your, just for the public's knowledge here, because this was already gone over in a meeting, the sodium high something or another
Bisulfite.
was in 2020 $1.05 per whatever, to in 2023 it was $2.86, an increase of 172%. Bioxide went from $2.09 to $2.93. 3/4 valve check went from $52 to $71. I mean, it's just across the board, everything on your list of kind of the everyday stuff that you buy and consume and spend money on is going up anywhere from, I think the lowest is 8, and then 11, all the way up to 172, and a lot of them are up 30 and 40%. Hence, a 7% increase being justified, hence, from our budgetary standpoint, where we thought rates were gonna cover, and again, we're not running this to make a profit, we're running this to break even and serve the customers, that based on those projections from 3 years ago, the last time we did this, or 4 years ago, we thought that these rates were gonna be adequate for some period of time and not have to show an increase like this. But in reality, we will run a deficit if we don't do this, simply because the cost of doing business with these inflationary pressures that were not our fault of people in Washington, 100% is contributing to what's going on here, correct?
Yes, everything we purchased, we've seen crazy increases in the last 2 years. And keep in mind, the projections that we're showing for expenses are based on the fact that, you know, we're assuming that those increases are going to be now at 3 or 4%. We're not gonna be at 7, 8%, 9%. So, you know, we're using optimistic projections that inflation is gonna come down to something reasonable. And so if that doesn't happen, if inflation does continue on, if it creeps back up to 7, 8, 9%, then our numbers are not gonna be very good.
But we're making the decision based on the knowledge that we know today.
Right. It's based on, I mean, it's projections. It's based off of where we hope, you know, the economy's gonna be in the future. And keep in mind, Commissioner Young, you know, when you look at the sewer side and you look at where we've been over the last, I wanna say 7, 8 years, we've not increased the sewer rates in that time period. So we had, you know, the board adopted 0% rate increases on the sewer side. We've kept it the same for the last 7, 8 years. And so now it's just, we're at a point where we can't continue on with that. And you see that in, you know, our expenses last year, where expenses exceeded revenue, you know. So we never like raising rates significantly, but in this case here, we have to in order to stay financially.
And just to be
viable.
perfectly clear from the public standpoint with the discussion of the carryover, that there are substantial, almost 10 million bucks, almost 30 million bucks. Oh, well, wait, why are you raising rates if you've got all this reserve? Why don't you explain why?
So on the water side, you know, we've got an aggressive capital improvement program where, you know, we're laying some big 24-inch mains. We've been laying, you know, 5 miles worth of 24-inch main. And then we're also been upgrading our treatment plants. You know, 2 years ago, we added softening to our treatment plant at the rate of like $35 million for the softening expansion of our treatment plants. And the projects that we have remaining on the books are to address the PFAS contaminant that EPA is putting out as far as new regulations to meet this forever chemical that needs to be removed. So we're going to, you know, we're going to add a new treatment process to the Richard A. Reniker water treatment plant, and that will be completed in the next 2 years. That's our goal, is to have this up and running by December of 2025, which is just, you know, less than 2 years from now. So we're aggressively working on that project, and then we have the expansion of a well field. So on the water side, we have some very aggressive capital projects that we need to complete in a short time period.
And with every public utility, we have an aging system. A lot of this stuff has been put in, the pipes themselves been put in the 70s, what have you, and we have a schedule, almost like paving of roads, where there's a schedule of doing it, or replacing that, or improving that. But I think that's something we're gonna talk about here in a little bit.
Second half of this, yes.
Is sometimes, when the pipes themselves get out of whack, your schedule gets thrown out the window because we have to do things to fix the problem right away, and that's something we'll discuss in one example here soon, I have a feeling.
Yes, on the water side here, let me point out to you, as our system ages, right? You know, we need to replace water mains, and the way we replace those water mains, the money that we get to replace those water mains comes from that margin between our operating cost and our revenues. So that margin that you see, which is not much here, that's what we're using to replace the water main.
That's where we get our capital budget from, is the surplus
From
between
operating.
revenue and expenditures. That carryover adds to that, and then when we have that surplus, that's where you go and do these large projects from.
Right, so the capital funds come from really 2 sources, well, from 3 sources. If we apply for grants and stuff like that, is one source, but the other source is that excess, that retained earnings, the difference between your expenses and your revenue, which in the water side, you know, we're cutting, well, that's the sewer side, but it's not, that's that margin that we're taking that margin and plowing it into our capital program. You know, we're running pretty tight margins here. But the other is the tap-in fees, connection fees, so from new customers. So those tap-in fees and connection fees go into our capital
So
program.
the bottom line is, no matter what happened we were dealt a hand. Inflationary pressures, according to your testimony, clearly affected your department. So one thing we can't do is run your department at a deficit. We still, it's one of the top things we do is public safety and then making sure water and sewer works, period, end of story. It's the top two things we do. And you're saying we have to do this, and that's in the context of we have not raised rates in literally 7 years
On the sewer side,
on the sewer
yes.
side. And it's been very marginal increases on the water side for some period of time. So the facts are the facts. No matter how much this board hates ever increasing rates to the citizens, it's cost of doing business, and we have to do it on occasion. And any surplus that has been built up, according to your graph, when you look in 2013 and all of the blue lines exceeding the red lines, that's why we have this capital account that's built up. But you already have capital budgetary plans that will spend that on these large projects to benefit the citizens over the next 5 to 10 years.
That's exactly the point, yes, that's the case. And when you look back in the historical graph here, on the water side especially, when you look back, we raised the rates, in 2018 to try to, raise revenues to plow into those softening projects. And that was successful, you know, our surplus, was decent then, because, you know, we raised the rates knowing that we're gonna spend a lot of money on our softening facilities.
And the
To
softening,
reduce-
and the softening was for the benefit of the residents, because a lot of, especially the newer residents, were used to coming in from areas that were used to soft water.
Yes.
And then they were spending money on their own softening systems and spending all of that, and that actually is a savings for those customers that used to spend their own money having to do the salt tablets and all that type of stuff, that now our water is soft. So again, that entire tens of millions of dollars we spent on that was a benefit to the consumers.
It's softened water. We're not down to zero. We softened down to what the standard is, which is 8 grains across the region.
Correct. If my colleagues, any more questions on this portion, it's,
No, I have I don't have a problem with the increases, and the tap-in fees are a different topic.
Yeah, I just have a question that's really more of an accounting question, because which kind of gets to the heart of the questions that I asked you about that delta. You know, are we collecting enough? And what I'm wondering is, I understand from an accounting standpoint, any overages go into some line, and that's where you build out your capital projects. And so when operating costs are more than what you expect in terms of revenues, you dip into that fund. I'm curious as to why that's not segregated, to say there's a piece of that we want to have some margin, just like we have in our budget. There's some margin for
Right.
reserve for exigence, or when inflationary pressures are such that, you know, we're seeing these costs increase dramatically, and then a capital fund, as opposed to one large fund where we know we have the resources, and so we just pull out of this, you know, this big pool.
I mean, we do run the books, and I've got Michael here who can explain the financial side of it in great details. But essentially, we run our books very similar to what the general fund runs. So our funds are broken into separate sub-funds. So we have an operating sub-fund and we have a capital sub-fund.
Okay, so,
All right? And so on the
to-
operating sub-fund, we want to keep a certain percentage over. So like, you
So
know.
that's what I think we need to understand about this when you come before us, is what is that margin that is standard operating procedure that on the operations side, we want to have in our operating reserve? Because there is some
Traditionally,
industry
when-
standard.
When Patty Solinsky was here, Patty would always say, one of our former business managers, is you always had to have 30% of extra revenue on hand, especially at the beginning of the year, just in order to get you through, and you don't wanna go below 30% of
That's
your
for your
average operating cost.
So
So-
I'm
so
just
far-
saying, from my standpoint, I hear that you account that way, but it's not presented that way. And so I would, in the future, like to know what our reserve is, because there's probably some times where you're not at that benchmark for whatever reasons,
Yes.
and I think we need to know that too. And then understand what in that big overage, it's not really an overage, it's what is, what is it that we can realistically plan for capital improvements? So that's not to say that you all don't know that, but I just think the way it's presented to us doesn't give, at least me, the granularity that would be helpful in understand, because the reason I asked the question, Chris, is, I recall your presentation about the tremendous amount of capital improvements that we have to make in the next 5 years. And I know we're gonna hear more from one community because we've had a lot of water main breaks that we need to invest in. That just would be a better way for me to understand, are we collecting enough to be able to predict our needs? So it's not that we didn't know these were needs, it's what I don't really have an understanding of is how close are we to being able to meet our needs? And when you're asking for a rate increase, that would be helpful to me to have that granularity to say, okay, well, I can see on your chart, where the bar graph shifts, but I don't have a real sense of what does that mean for an operating reserve and what you think we're gonna need in the next period of time for capital improvements.
Right, so, that's where you're trying to, so we do, I think, a good job of presenting the operating side. But I think what I'm hearing from you is you would like to hear more about the capital side with the projects that we have planned and the revenues that we have in reserve. How does that balance out, because.
And I think the operating side needs to include for me what our annual operating, reserve is.
That's 20% on the water side that we typically want to be. We do a long-term forecast. I'll do like a 5-year forecast on our capital. And on the water side, with what we're projecting to spend, we typically want about a 20% margin on our operating revenue. And on the sewer side, we would like to be around 10%. Some of those projects aren't as urgent, so we don't need that money up front like that, but on the water side, we do.
Well, and again, I think that's really helpful information for us to have, is like, okay, there are reasons why we may not be at that benchmark, and we can talk about then what are the reasons. Well, these projects are actually pushed out. I mean, I'm not looking to raise the rates any more than is necessary, none of us are. But I know there's an awful lot of capital projects, and it's presented as one big pool of resources. We collect this over, then it goes into this fund, and then as we have overages, we sweep from the fund, and that's not how you account for it on your balance sheet.
Exactly, yeah, I have sub-funds and I have reports
Yeah,
that I do.
And
to
so I
separate
don't
that.
necessarily want to know the ins and outs of your accounting for it, but it would be helpful from a P&L standpoint to be able to say, like, here is not just the revenue and the expenditure, but within operating, like, to know our benchmark is 20%.
Yes.
And on water side and 10% on sewer side is really helpful, because that then shows us what do we really have if we want to maintain the benchmark. Year to year, we may choose not to for a variety of reasons, but what do we really have to invest in capital? Because the overage isn't really what we have to invest in capital. It's the overage minus our
Yeah, because we have
operating
certain
margin.
things like we have to have so much, 150% of our debt that we need to keep back
Yes.
and 30% of
That
yes.
to me is really important to know, because it's just presented to us, this is an overage, and we have all these capital projects. Both things are true. But what it doesn't help me see is this isn't really the overage. We have to have a operating margin. We have to have, some ratio to debt service. That, to me, is relevant, especially as we get into the next conversation around emergent, capital needs to be able to better understand, are we sufficiently thinking about the future as it relates to our capital needs?
Yes.
Understood.
You said there were 3 sources of revenue that we had. Now, I think you said tap fees, the amount of money we bring in through our rate structure that are paid for by our ratepayers, and then you said grants. Are those the 3 sources of income?
Those are the main 3 sources.
Okay. And we've been talking so far about our rate structures. I think it's very valuable to us to know how we compare to other jurisdictions and what they're charging, because presumably their cost structure is similar in terms of operating, and their cost structure may or may not be similar in terms of how recently they put in their system as to whether they're replacing things and having all these capital costs. But our system is pretty old, I take it, in a lot of jurisdictions. Is that right?
Well, some of our system is, yeah. Some of
Yeah.
our system dates back to 1960.
Do we keep water and sewer separate in terms of accounting?
Yes.
And we keep separate funds for projects, and so what we take in for sewer has to be paid for sewer, and what we take in for water has to be paid for water, and that includes capital expenditures, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, those are the nature of enterprise funds, and that's state laws set them up that way, correct?
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, and again, you briefly touched on it, but since this is an important discussion, one of the things that, from a capital standpoint that's coming, you mentioned PFAS. So and again, just so the public understands, since it's a public hearing, there was a chemical used decades ago that was predominantly used in suppressing fires at things like airports. And the firefighters would go out and spray the airplanes that were, they would do test fires on old airplanes. And the firefighters would go out, use this foamy stuff, spray it, put out the fire on the airplane, and everybody thought that was the end of the day. The reason we're talking about it now is because there was a particular chemical that was used that now went through the soil down into our groundwater, and we happen to be one of the areas where that chemical shows up. And the federal EPA has determined that's a really, really bad thing to have. And they have changed the definition of what's an unacceptable level from, say, up here to all the way like down here, correct?
Yes.
And so that is now something that we have to account for and correct, and so you're budgeting that also, that we're going to have to now clean up that chemical. We hope that the federal government will help offset some of that cost, and we think they will, because there's been class action suits against the manufacturers, and there's been hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that's come in for a nationwide settlement to do exactly this. But again, we can't count on that because we have to fix this, and that's part of what's going on here, correct?
That's correct. I think when you look at all the municipalities out there, we're on the front end of the curve here. We've identified this early on, a couple years ago, and we've been actively pursuing a plan to address this. So right now, we just had a conference call 2 days ago with US EPA, the research facility here in Cincinnati. And US EPA is going to come down into our facility at the Richard Renneker treatment plant, we're gonna set up a pilot test. We're gonna run different resins to treat this contaminant. And based off of that, we're gonna move forward with the design. So that's one thing we're doing is, you know, partnering with US EPA to identify the best way to treat it. And then the second thing is, in the next week or two, you will see a resolution to amend our existing contract with AECom. That's the national engineering firm that designed the softening upgrades at our treatment plants. AECom is the company that we went through and we evaluated all the different companies. AECom is the company we chose, we're recommending to implement the new treatment process at Reniker. And so they're on board, they're ready to go. The idea is that they'll design it here, and then we'll go into construction towards the end of this year and be done by the middle of next year with this treatment facility. Right now, I want to point out, you know, you mentioned that it's a bad chemical, you know, based off of what EPA says. It is. But the way we're running our treatment process right now, we're meeting those standards. We're meeting the proposed standards that EPA is
Which is a
proposing.
great point. There is no danger to the public right now, but it's
Yeah, so
something that we
I
have, we
wanna
have
point
to
out,
address
yes,
this.
that the membranes, the nanofiltration process, the NF90 membranes that we installed at the water treatment plant does a really good job of removing it. It's just that bypass that we have that does not. So we're choosing wells that have low concentrations of this and running it through our nanofiltration process. And by doing that, we're meeting the standard that EPA has out there.
Very good. And then finally, because you always try to look into the future a little bit, I know our friends from the HBA are gonna stand up and they asked something on this consideration, or to get some consideration relative to a rate increase. Even they are saying, we understand, you know, that this has to happen. What do you think of their recommendation on if you already have, you know, platted lots or something like that, that they've already built into a pro forma, that this is our cost, you know, does this affect that, or what do you think of that?
So we have those rates that we're proposing for the new tap-in fees and the new sewer connection fees. And we've not increased those rates in the last, I wanna say 17 years. They've been the same.
So that's the tap versus, which is what they're probably more concerned with, versus the user rate, which
It's the new connection fees for new customers. New
we're not even
customers,
talking about right now, correct?
That's, yes, we haven't even touched that. So that's I think we have a rate schedule here.
This is for the tap fees. The concern, I mean, the builders are not so much, I mean, obviously they care about rates for water rates and sewer rates that the customer charges, and they might be in charge of HOAs and things where they use that. But the real concern for them is the tap fee and the changing of that tap fee considerably after they've already done their financing for particular projects. I think that's their concern.
Right, and you heard last month, you heard one of the developers, Pimlico Point Developments, which is Hal Silverman. You know, they have a very large development on Tylersville Road that includes multifamily, a mix of businesses, where the tap-in fee, you know, and connection fees are running into $1 million because of the large development that they have. So we totally understand that, and so we're very much in support of grandfathering in those fees for those large developments. Typically, the commercial developments like Core 5 out there on State Route 63, or you know any hospital. You had Mercy Hospital that came in. So any of these large developments, non-residential, not single-family home, but multifamily developments and commercial developments, we're very much in favor of doing grandfathering in, recognizing they worked those numbers into their pro forma, okay, for the development. We're not so much in favor of grandfathering in single-family residential.
Okay, well,
because-
explain that.
All right, so, you know, so say like, any of the subdivisions that go in, say, you know, up anywhere in the county, because there's probably actively 60, 70 subdivisions that are going in right now in different phases. And it becomes, you know, it's not the developer that pays that fee, it's the home builder that pays that fee. So it's not, so the developer itself, who's putting in the roadways and putting in the storm and water line and sewer line, we're not charging those fees up front. We don't, you know, we're not, I don't know if Western Water does that, but we're not charging a developer the tap-in fees for 30 homes when they plat a 30-home subdivision. That fee goes on to the builder. So whenever a builder wants to build a house, then they come in and pay that tap-in fee.
All right, so what you're saying
Granted-
is that the builder pays a tap-in fee, or the owner of the home pays a tap-in fee. Whoever is the owner of the property, whether it's the ultimate homeowner or it's the builder, they pay a tap-in fee at the moment that they connect. Is that right?
When they went to pull a building permit, yes.
Okay,
go to
wait a second,
pull
that's
building
different.
permit,
So when they pull the building permit to actually build the house,
That's when they pay the.
so
tap.
that's typically is gonna be the builder, not the owner.
That's typically.
All right, and so he would build that into his cost for that house. And you're saying and the same rules apply to commercial developments or multifamily or apartments, and you don't have a problem grandfathering that. You only have a problem, I just want to understand what you're saying now. You only have a difficulty of grandfathering in for single-family residential construction.
That's right, that's.
Okay,
the
now,
issue.
okay, so why are you distinguishing between commercial, industrial, and
'Cause it's-
apartments and
'cause it's
condominiums?
Two reasons. Why is,
Okay.
because it's not the developer paying it, it's the builder.
But that's
So
all, that's true of the other one too.
That fee, no, the developer pays for it, because the developer's building the multifamily, building the commercial.
All you're doing is you're charging the person that is the owner of the builder. That's no different.
So it's, the builder's paying for it, and then also it becomes a nightmare to kind of try to track this on our side, because we have 30, 40, 50 active subdivisions going on. And then you have to track, you know, what phase is this, because they're recommending based off of plats. So when you receive an approved plat, then those, anything that's been approved would fall under that grandfather rule.
Okay, but wait, is
So-
is the problem
It's a
your tracking
nightmare.
problem?
It's a
So in other words, when I saw the letter, I read the letter, and they wanted you to grandfather in anything that currently has a approved preliminary plan. All right, and
Approved preliminary plan is even worse, because then.
that's
because
what
you
they're
have
saying
like-
in this letter.
You know, you have all these
Wrong.
large subdivisions like Shaker Run that has like 800 homes that has.
That are just
approved-
on paper somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
that's,
And-
it's an approved plan that was approved 10 years ago.
Okay, so I want
And
to,
it's-
I get that. So I'm reading their letter, and they said one idea is to grandfather to the current fee structure lots that are part of approved preliminary plans. And you don't have a problem with that when it comes to a commercial, industrial, or multi, apartment condominium structure. You have a problem with it when it comes to single-family residential. We've already established that's the issue. And the problem is the approved preliminary plans. And that's because you're saying when these homes ultimately get built, so let's say you plat out 100 homes in a preliminary plan. And then as each of those homes, because you're not charging a tap-in fee just because there's a blank lot that's gonna have a future house put on it. You're charging it when there's you go in and get a permit to start building on that lot, right?
That's correct,
Okay,
yes.
and so the problem that you're saying is keeping track of who's covered by this grandfathering, is that right?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so there's
Because
no-
you
there's-
have, I'll give you an example, the Grow property, out there on Henderson Road, I think Henderson Road. That was platted, the preliminary plan was approved well before I was here, 20 years ago.
Does the
And it's-
preliminary
and
plan
it's-
show all the lots that are laid out then? A preliminary plan would show all the lots?
It would show, yes, all the,
Okay,
all the
and
roads.
we got in Stotler, we had a plan that was approved, and it's got 370 some things, and it might only come in with 270, I mean, we're working on that, you guys, our staff is. But, so, in that particular case, they would be grandfathered into the 370, it might turn out to be way lower than that. But you're saying, you, as the person who is charging the tap-in fee, don't know which houses fall within this exception?
It's the fact that they're asking for the preliminary plan, which would be, a ton of homes, because, your example is accurate, Stotler, it's 300 homes or whatever.
Yeah, it could be 370, it could be 270.
And
Yeah.
that development could take 5, 6, 7 years to develop. So that means no increases in 5, 6, 7 years. And then what happens if we, 5 years down the road, then we come in and recommend another rate increase, and then, and then it just becomes like.
And there is a difference on the commercial side, multifamily side, and the single-family side, because once you acquire the land, that is your cost, engineering, what have you. Then if the rates are going up down the road, that is passed on to the eventual homeowner. Versus a developer of a commercial or multifamily, they are incurring that cost themselves.
Yeah.
And that is, there's a lot fewer of those going on. So that's where they've already gone, and not only have we acquired the property, we're gonna put up a warehouse. And we've gone and gotten financing for $1 million deal, and all of a sudden, it's really $1.2 million because now the tap fees have gone up. And that is a direct cost to me, and my financing is already in place.
Yeah, I mean, so the point that Commissioner Young is making is that a developer or somebody, if he's gonna be the ultimate owner, this is something that he's borrowing on, and this is an expense to him. But then with a homeowner, that is the owner, and the person who builds that home can pass that charge on to that homeowner. I think that's the point.
And that's what
Commissioner Young
happens.
is
So,
making.
what
And so I
happens-
think that's a really legitimate question for us to ask the HBA in light of that point, why your distinction does not have some merit.
So, our increase is if it receives water from, and sewer from us, it's $1,000 increase, for water and a $700 increase for sewer. So it's $1,700 increase. That cost would go passed on to the homeowner, probably with some markups from the developer, you'll hear that, because they want to keep their margins. If their margin is 10%, then it goes up, to somewhere around 2,000. But that cost goes on to the building, to the homeowner who's gonna buy that property. And so the question is a $2,000 increase on a $350,000, $400,000 home, is that gonna keep somebody from developing?
Well, the other question is how are tap-in fees compared to other jurisdictions? Because a homeowner is going to be interested in the cost of buying a home. And if the tap-in fees, and I've not seen this data, but I'm sure you're gonna show me the data of tap-in fee comparisons. If the tap-in fees that you're suggesting, even with the increase, are lower than competing or other territories, even in Warren County, I'd like to know whether we're going up above it or below it. You gave us these nice rate comparisons. What's the tap-in fee
I'm
comparison?
not sure on. So Greene County, water tap fees $5,000. Butler County's $44.65.
You don't have a chart on this?
Huh?
You don't have a chart like you did for the other rates, structures?
No, Michael has it here in a table here, if you wanna see it.
Oh, could we do that? So in other words, let me ask you this, do you know what the tap-in fee in Mason and Lebanon and Monroe?
Mason on sewer tap fees $64.94.
Okay, and what are you suggesting, what are we at now and what are you suggesting going to?
We're on,
We're
yeah.
suggesting on the sewer $5,500 and the water $5,000.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to get at the fact that you're raising, if we raise it, we're still under our competing jurisdictions like Mason, they're still over that, right?
Mason is they just provide sewer service, so City Mason is at $6,500 roughly.
So it's $1,000 more than what you're proposing.
Yes,
In Mason, and what about Lebanon?
we do not have the city of Lebanon.
Don't have Lebanon.
Monroe, Middletown?
No,
No, I just got the counties and then the city of Mason, like Greene County
it's
is similar to
similar
our.
entities.
Okay, well, you know what,
to
I'll
us.
bet you that the HBA knows all these numbers.
But, you have to look at, is an entity trying to attract?
Correct. There's a different philosophical approach of, it's almost you're trying to buy the business. We're trying to keep this, because no one wants to build here, so I'm gonna reduce my fees. and provide minimal services just because I'm trying to get people in the door versus we basically have the opposite problem of
Is we have to manage growth. We have
everybody and
to-
their
we have
brothers
to build.
trying to build here,
Yeah.
so.
We have to build stuff.
All right, any more questions on this? I'm trying to get this moving since we got another thing at 10:30.
Okay.
All right, very good. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a public hearing. Interested comments from anyone wishes to speak on this matter regarding rate increases? Morning, Mr. Burley.
Morning. Greg Burling, in my capacity with the Home Builder Association. And as you read my letter, we had quite a bit of conversations with staff, with Chris and his staff. We understand the need for these increases, for the sewer tap increases and the rate increases. We want to offer our support for that. We understand that with the county to keep a balanced budget and to continue providing the services that make us want to build in the county and develop in the county, that this is needed. So one of the ideas we had of how to kind of soften the blow to existing builders and developers now, and you're right, developers, and I'm a developer, I don't pay the sewer and water tap fees. It goes to the builder when they build on the lots. Now, there are developers, Fisher Homes, MI, and some of the other Drees do develop and build their own sites. So for them, it's a package deal with the developed lot and the home built. So it's a little distinction between what I do versus.
But they're not financing that up front.
They're paying it when they build that, when they start the home. That's correct.
Yeah, the permit, when they pull the permit, they told us is when they charge the fee.
Yep.
And I'm very amenable, as you know, to this distinction, and they apparently are in agreement with your idea about things that are in a preliminary plan and have been approved, but not to single-family residences. And you heard our discussion with that, and Commissioner Young's questions, and then my questions, because I'm very amenable to doing what you've proposed, and apparently our sewer and water department agree with you with everything except single-family residential development. And then the question is, because it seems to me that the rationale behind your position, or the HBA's position, is that you've got financing, you've got people that have had committed costs and expectations, and that it would be fair to grandfather in the rate structure when those expectations were being used for planning and for financial purposes. But is that true of building a home on a single, is that same rationale apply?
So I guess that, in listening to the discussion, I can understand, and then Chris has mentioned it in the past, that it'd be hard to manage that over a long period of time. There's developments that have a large amount of lots that are approved in a preliminary plan that could take 5, 7, 10, 15 years, during the recession, 20 years to develop, and to manage that would be difficult. So we'd be amenable to a time frame where it can be phased in, whether it's I think it's capped at 2 years for commercial and multifamily developments that are listed. And if there's a time frame where builders that have already that have platted lots that are actively building in those subdivisions and that are actively selling their homes, that they're factoring in the old rates on those homes right now as they're trying to sell those. And if there is a time period where they could be selling those homes under the old rates, and then it's phased in from there.
How do you do that though, Greg, if most of these larger developments are in phases? So phase one has 50 homes and there's 3 that are active right now, and I've kind of, but even though that builder is really not paying that rate, even if it changes tomorrow, home builder has to factor that in to the new price schedule for, future buyer. Buyer of today got it at one rate, $2,000 less than the buyer of tomorrow. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, whether it's mortgage rates or whatever it is, versus if it's, okay, that's phase one, especially now these other phases could take 5 or 8 years.
Yeah.
but I'm active in the subdivision, but those other phases could take years.
So it'd be done with plats, so recorded plat versus a preliminary plan.
See, I don't have a problem with them tracking this. I think that's doable. And I think it's doable to have a system where they're gonna, so I don't buy that we need to somehow modify your suggestion because it's gonna be a difficult accounting or knowledge or tracking feature. I don't think that's not my real issue here. My real issue is it justified because of a commitment of financing or cost structure and reliance in doing this project and saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this fee structure was gonna go up, so it's even it's still lower than comparable people in the area, but it's gone up $1,000 or $2,000 for this tap-in fee, and that's a huge surprise to my financing. And but the argument that they've made is that, well, that's not really the developer cost, that's the builder of the home, and ultimately he passes that on to the homeowner. And so I'm wondering, why is it that this reliance interest that I think is completely legitimate, and I want to accommodate, and so do they, but why does that apply to a single-family residential lot that when they get the permit and they pay the tap-in fee, they pass that along to the ultimate homeowner?
So typically on the development side, so since, I'll use an example of myself, so, because I'm not the builder, the end builder on it. On the development side, when I get to the preliminary plan, I've negotiated lot prices with the builder, land price with the landowner, and those lot prices are based on what I can make money on the lots for, and on the builder side, they're setting their prices by the market and what they think they can sell,
Okay,
homes for.
Greg, I get that, but here's my question, and maybe we're gonna go to it. So you as a developer have a whole bunch of costs in developing and putting in street and sewer and water and electric and the planning process and the legal stuff. And those are all your costs, and you gotta make money as a developer. And then you create single-family residential lots that you might sell to one builder or a whole bunch of builders. And they've got a different analysis of this. And by the way, and we know in the past few years, since lumber costs have gone way up and other things have gone way up because of this inflation caused by some people in Washington, that we know they've spent a lot of money that they probably shouldn't have been spending, and they cause inflation, because that's how that works. And those builders all of a sudden say, geez, my cost of building this house has gone way up, because I'm paying 50% more for just lumber. And he's gonna pass that on to who? To the guy that buys the home. Same with the tap-in fee. So, and the tap-in fee portion of that home is minuscule compared to the inflationary rate that's been hitting people and builders on all these other items that go into homes. And so I'm wondering, is it really true that the very minimal cost of an increase of a tap-in fee is relevant?
Relevant to the business side?
Yeah,
The financial side?
look, I want to vote for your suggestion, because I'm looking for you to support that.
So so a $1,700 cost, that's in, and as Chris said, that it's, there's, markup tacked onto it. So let's say it's $2,000, $2,500, doesn't sound like a lot of money. And on a $400,000 house, that's what, 0.5%?
Well, yeah, my comparison point was, it's paid for by the ultimate purchaser of the house, not the developer and not the builder. He's only, this modification is only relevant with regard to comparing it to other jurisdictions and territories where he can build. And I'm saying, given the fact that you have an extremely significant inflationary rate on the costs of the structure of building a home that is way more than this cost, and is, happening, as you know, why is this particular matter important to the builder of the home who's gonna pay this, or the owner ultimately? Why is this significant?
So I think it's significant because there's homes being built now, or there's homes that are gonna be built that are being sold, that are being marketed to sell at one price, and then there's an increase that's coming in that I think the proposal is that the increase happens immediately
Okay.
versus being staged.
So wait, let me see if I can understand what you're saying.
But a builder can't sell a home,
Yeah.
can't sell a lot until there's a final plat. not a preliminary plat.
Yeah, so that, and I think I can,
exactly right.
I can understand that on the preliminary plan is that, that tying it to a plat, to a recorded plat would be,
Yeah, from my standpoint, we're not gonna go down the plat aspect. I just think that that's, from a record-keeping standpoint, I do agree that that would be just tremendous. I mean, there's,
I do
what,
too.
there's thousands of platted lots
Yes.
in this county that now they're gonna have to track of, well, when was that platted? This fee applies, and there's no harmed party at this moment. Everybody's gonna know what they're paying 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever, when they actually pull a building permit and say, yeah,
Well,
I'm
and
doing
the flip
this.
side of that too, I think is important. It's not that we're, then if not, it's less profit, if you will, that we're making. It's higher increases socialized across everyone to be able to pay for the upkeep, maintenance, repair, replacement of infrastructure. And so, you know, there's no justification in my mind for somebody who's not tapped in already to be paying a part of that, their share of that socialized cost. I mean, you know, having built a home and I sign my contract and construction's gonna start 4 or 5 months from now, in that contract, if the cost of materials increases, there's escalation in there that's built into that because of the risk associated with it. Similarly, you know, if you know, all of these costs are going to be spelled out, except for when they're not, because we're not gonna start building for 4 months or 5 months or 9 months or 12 months. And there's an adjustment in a commodity price or some exigence that, you know, an inflationary clause or something that's in there. I just don't see how you can both keep track of all of this from an accounting standpoint, but I don't also see how it's justified on its face when I can go to any of these subdivisions and I can see what the cost is. You know, they advertise from the 350s, and there's no homes in there that are at the 350s. They're at the 425, 435, 450s, because people are willing to pay to be here. And we're not overcharging, we're just charging what we need to charge to get the infrastructure in place. I'm incredibly sympathetic to the other issue in terms of, you know, the development side because of the financing needs, but I don't see how the same builder can charge the customer more as their costs are increased, but we can't charge our customer more when our costs are increasing.
well, I think, it's not that you don't get to charge them the increased price, it's that there's a phase-in of that, and that's, I guess, there's a time period where those plats, and you know, I understand where Chris and Mr. Young or Commissioner Young are saying it'd be a difficult to track. You know, I think there's something that we could work with the Water and Sewer Department to help them track that. But
Yeah, but Commissioner Jones brings up a really good point. I don't know that philosophically we want to do that, simply because those new residents that aren't even here yet are helping pay for the cost of the upkeep of the system. And again, that ties into utilization of the pipes and replacement schedules and, you know, the capacity of those things. If it's accelerated and there's more people moving in, more people using the infrastructure, you know, does it wear out? I don't know, all of those types of things. And again, we are socializing that cost. That's for everyone to pay into. And now someone that doesn't even live here, well, you don't have to pay into that. And the fact that even with these increases, we're still below a lot of our surrounding areas. It's almost like, you know, thank your lucky stars that we were below this during this building boom, and this has been unbelievably profitable to build in Warren County, and people, you know, the free market said, this is a great place to build and to raise your family and work. And it's going up marginally only because our costs are going up marginally. And if it happens all at once, I don't particularly have a problem with that, simply because it's been almost under market for so long.
And I almost always agree with my colleagues and Mr. Brush, but I still don't think that there's a problem tracking, because I think I can shift the burden to the person who wants to get the discount on a grandfathered rate and make them prove that they were part of a plat at some point, a designated time that covers this, and
Well,
make them have the burden
I'll
of
take that issue off the table then, I'll
Yeah, and
concede your point, but from my standpoint, that's the least,
I agree with you.
The
I-
least
I agree with
onerous
you.
issue.
I think that is the latter thing that Commissioner, that Commissioner Young made the point, and I've been making this point, which is, I totally want to do something that you're asking if there really is a reliance factor here, and if there really is a legitimate financing factor here. But I don't understand it in the context of how this works on a lot that gets a permit and then has to pay it. And at that point, where so there's a cost that is incurred when that happens. And I wanna know, why is there a reliance on some different amount? Because when that builder gets his permit and he's got a contract with somebody to build, he's gonna charge them the current rates, not some grandfathered thing. The lumberyard isn't giving him a grandfathered rate, unless he had some prior contract to do something or other. I don't know, the plumber, the electrician, they're all charging him their current rates. And the current rate for this tap-in fee on the date, so I'm wondering, why the difference? I don't understand the difference. I've already told you, I want to accommodate you. I generally would vote for you. I don't understand the reliance cost financing element of this.
Well, I think it's a small portion of a whole budget on a house, but and I think when I kind of revised to where a plat, or an approved plat versus a preliminary plan, I can understand on a preliminary plan, those can last out for a long period of time. But when a subdivision's platted, a current platted subdivision, those builders have gone in there and they've negotiated prices with the developer, if it's an outside developer, based on what their market rates were at the existing.
Do they do that with the lumberyard and the plumber and the
But the
electrician?
developer, that cost is not going to the developer.
Well, it's the sale price of the home is how they consider what they can pay for the lot.
yeah, I get that, but that's in that current market conditions where it's the same, they're also factoring in what their labor costs are, what their material costs, and 6, 8, 10, 12, 3 years later, those things change. They're factoring in what they anticipate that change being over time when they're deciding what they're gonna build the lot. I mean, I just don't see the rationale for this one minuscule piece of the puzzle. And I get that you have all these small little pieces on top of one another, and before you know it, you have a $400,000 home. I get that. But why that should be excluded from, market principles that all of the other factors that are making up the cost of that home have, are being impacted by the increases that they're getting along the way, no matter, no matter what the cost was at the time they purchased the land.
And I 100% agree with both my colleagues, and I 100% agree with you that if I was in your position, I would be asking literally the same thing. What you're asking is not unreasonable. I mean, in theory, there is a rationale why your position would be justified. But from our standpoint, as stewards of this service, this public utility, we are charged by law of making sure that there's enough money there for it. And right now, there's not. And when we start adding more and more customers to that utility, we know the cost is going up. So we hear what you're saying on the development side. We do not want to inflict harm on someone that's already gone and financed a project, and they're outlaying it, and now all of a sudden we're retroactively coming in and increasing fees. We're not doing that. This is all prospective, that anyone that's going to be building, they haven't expended the money yet. And I don't think you're gonna convince us otherwise of that.
No, is this, this would go in effect today on a vote today, the increase?
Is that what you're asking of us?
There's a draft resolution for the board to consider, and I think it has impact today, it does.
Well, we can pass it and to put it on a different date. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I think that and we, HBA appreciates the consideration for the existing multifamily and commercial projects. So
Yeah,
we
industrial,
appreciate that.
commercial,
Yeah.
that's, you're gonna get that because they've
Yeah.
agreed to this.
Well, no, yeah, I've seen, no, we appreciate that, so, I think there's a 2
I would be open to doing it at the end of the quarter, April 1.
I don't-
Potentially.
It's fine.
Okay.
Does that get you something?
No.
We'll throw you a bone.
You sell, I guess is the.
Well, no, more pool permits as many, at least for the builders, for developers, obviously, it doesn't,
So if it starts May 1, is that okay?
I think April 1.
April, end of the quarter, this quarter.
Okay.
another quarter.
Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, so the resolution, I think, calls out that the user fees that we're recommending, the user fees that we talked about.
The rate structure.
Would go into effect in the next billing cycle, and then we could modify that to say
The tap-in
The
fees.
tap-in fees for residential could go into effect whenever you want to adopt that.
Yeah. That sounds like it.
April first.
April
What
1st?
is your pleasure with that?
I would hope for more, or I would like for more, but whatever's amenable to the commissioners, and appreciate, like I said, appreciate the holding the tap fees. Tim Burgoyne with Silverman Companies here, he spoke for you before, and he gave you a really good example of what that does to his development. I'm in the same business, so I totally understand that, so an April 1st date, if that's amenable to the commissioners, so.
Yeah, so everything else effective today. Bruce, can we do
The next
this?
billing cycle.
Yeah, I need some clarification on what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, everything as proposed takes effect as of today, with the exception of,
Water
with
and
the
sewer rates
rates.
take it the next building cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, next billing cycle, as proposed, and residential tap-in fees, the new schedule will take effect April 1.
So that's
Okay, so
permits issued after
residential-
April 1.
Residential tap for water and connect for sewer.
After April 1. That went, because it's done based on permitting, so as they request a permit for any new residential structure affected by our tap-in fees for both water and sewer would be effective as of April 1.
And are there gonna be any grandfathering exception, none's?
No,
Yes.
just, well, on the development side, yeah, we're talking about residential only. So the fees, I mean, how's it proposed now?
residential single family would go into effect April 1st.
Right.
But then what about commercial?
We're
that's-
grandfathering.
In the resolution, it talks about commercial and non-residential or multifamily.
That is grandfathered already in the resolution?
Grandfathered in
Yes.
2 years, so they have 2 years to develop.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so make sure that I'm clear, and maybe we wanna hear from Tim, because that's the one I'm really interested in. On the residential side, when you have Mr. Brouse's recommendation doesn't, clarify for me what that means. Because Tim's gonna come on up, and Tim's gonna tell you he's got a development, meaning the, Pimlico development on Tyler's
Listed.
Field, which has single family in it, apartments in it, duplexes in it, and maybe has a commercial component, so it's a mixed development. So what is Mr. Brouse proposing related to single family if it's in a development with these other mixed uses?
I would say the rules are the rules. I mean, the single family, comes in as.
If it's a permit for a single family, it starts on April 1. If it's a permit for the others, it does not. It's grandfathered for
grandfathered
2
for
years.
Regardless of what development it's in, it's
Yes.
just a classification?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, my name's Tim Burgoyne, thanks for hearing me. Our situation, you know, everything's a one-off, I guess, in the world, but, we have no for sale product. Everything we have, it is an apartment community. We're doing something unique at Pimlico, and that is we have stacked product where you live on 2 floors, everybody has their own
It's not
entrance.
single-family residential?
Please?
It's not single-family residential?
Well, there is a side-by-side attached unit, and we do have 20 single-family, but they are absolutely rentals. It's all on the same parcel of ground. We care for it
Okay,
just
so
like
you're, this is an
apartment inside.
entire rental community.
It is an entire rental community. It's just some of the
Can we
rental
distinguish
units-
between
Yeah,
that?
which honestly, I have no interest, you already know my feelings on this, I have no interest in trying to accommodate you on lower fees on rental communities.
Well, I guess, here, if I may restate my point from the other day, is that we're not selling a product, a home to somebody, we're developing, we
No,
own
I
it
get it, I
long
get
term.
exactly what you're saying. So
And
that
we,
you're the
we have
example.
in our,
You're the example of the person who has committed funds, financing, et cetera, and now this is a legitimate cost that is an increase based upon your prior reliance. I think you're the example that I was searching for. I don't have any problem if we can draft it to give you the credit for 2 years.
I do not on single-family homes. I mean, it just,
well,
that's the
they're
way it
really
is.
not single-family homes, they're rental units that are detached from one another is all they are. They're all on the same parcel of ground, we maintain them inside and out, we change light bulbs for people, you live in them just like you live in any other apartment.
Well, I'll let you and staff and lawyers work that out. We're talking a high-level policy, and the policy is single. I want to give a little bit of time consideration for single-family residential. And I'm not gonna make a determination of what your product is right now.
I think the way it's listed in here, the rate shall apply to, on the resolution, the rate shall apply to the existing development plan, and changes or expansion of the proposed development shall incur fees and charges currently in effect, and it lists the developments.
Yeah,
So
we're
it
just
lists-
listed as a
It's
development.
listed as a development.
The resolution I have,
It needs to go back and come back next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it's a public hearing. Anybody else want to speak on this matter? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Hearing none, is there a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
Yes?
And yes, we'll readdress this. Chris, what else we got? We got somewhat pressing issue. We've got the public here. Thank you for this esoteric discussion of rates and what goes on with public utilities. I'm sure everyone is thrilled. What's going on State Route 48? We've not, I don't think you've come before us on this.
No, so this is something that's been ongoing and emerging for us for the last couple of months. We've experienced a number of main breaks out on State Route 48 that has been quite puzzling for us. What we're showing is a map, and this is in the Mainville area. We're showing a map in I don't know if it's in purple there, are the locations. I don't know why it comes up that way. This is not, the graph is kind of odd. It shows 9s. I don't know why it's showing 9s, but wherever there's a 9 on State Route 48 on that map is where we've had a main break in the last 6 months. So when you look at it.
What is
there-
it, what is a main break?
we're showing pictures here. This is where we had a rupture in the main, either.
And it comes up with spraying water all over the place like we see.
Yes, because the water main is under pressure, and at this location, it's under about 80 PSI.
How far, how underground are these pipes?
Our pipes are 4 foot 6 inches underground, 54 inches underground.
54, and so if this
So-
pipe breaks,
so
it's
this-
under high pressure, and it's, even though it's 54 inches underground,
It
the
blows
water's
out.
coming up like a fountain.
That's what we have here.
And,
We're
and
showing
you gotta
pictures.
fix that like right away, right?
We do. We have crews 24 hours on call that once there's a main break and we're notified of it, they mobilize. They get out there as quickly as they can. They shut down the valves. They kill the main. And then they have a crew that comes out there with backhoes and dump trucks. And we have guys out there that go and repair the main.
So you had, this entire line you wanna replace, right? Because you've got so
There's
many breaks in
1,000
this line,
feet.
it's clear that this is a problem.
There's 1,000 feet of main out here. For some reason, I don't know why, it's very problematic. It's emerged its ugly head in the last 6 months here. And so there's 1,000 feet that we're looking to replace, and that's what you see, this alignment here. This map here is the white and blue line is the proposed alignment of a new main that we would like to construct and expedite.
For
This is
$750,000.
right, and the reason why it's so daggone expensive is that this area, it's a very narrow corridor where the houses sit like 20 foot off of the roadway, and so there's not much right-of-way there, so we're gonna end up in the roadway.
So how much disruption of traffic and of the quiet enjoyment of their property are they gonna have, and for how long?
I don't know if the disruption is such a concern, because this will take a couple weeks to get in, and our contractors do a good job of accommodating the homeowners there. So they work with the homeowners to make sure they have access, egress, and in and out of their homes.
Is
So
it gonna
they do a
affect
good
traffic?
job.
Is it gonna take a lane off, so you're gonna have to have that?
There will have to be detours. We're working with the city of Mainville. The mayor there, Mayor Beebe, has been very good. We're very appreciative of him. And they've been, and so they're working with us. They actually went out and obtained the survey, and we're compensating them for the survey to expedite this process.
How long will it take you to do the work from start to completion?
We have the design still, we're underway now, and then we'll go through the bidding process and the construction. We hope to have this done by the end of this year.
And once you start it, so that you're now closing off a lane during certain periods of time or affecting people's property, from that point to the end point, how much time is it?
From when
When the point you start to
dig?
actually dig and then you
this will
finish it?
probably take maybe 3 weeks to put in.
Okay, so if there's gonna be a 3-week disruptive period, that you're gonna have some portion of the day.
Detours.
You're in
traffic
detours, you're gonna have a
detours.
lane closed, you're gonna have people all that
Yep.
stuff. Okay.
As opposed to
Water mains.
water.
Yeah, as opposed to the water fountain thing that's been going on.
And so I want to point out, in this situation, it's very concerning for us, because, in 2 of these mains, we've actually experienced structural damage to homes out there.
Okay, we gotta fix this.
So there's, when you saw that
You
picture
don't have to
of,
convince us, you gotta fix it.
My only question relates to, under the law, we have power to do things immediately if, in an emergency situation, but it has to do with the price of the project, that we can, without bidding, we can just go do stuff sometimes, correct?
on emergency, so, yes, so there's.
So why can't we, this is an emergency, but we can't,
Well,
why
that's
is it gonna
where,
take that long?
what would help us out is that if, we're in the middle of the design, we're doing the design in-house to expedite the process. So we can have design drawings done probably, in a couple weeks here. And then, we typically go through the bidding process for contractors, where we put together a bid package, we put it out on the street, we advertise it to contractors. The contractors, respond to it, then we enter into contract. That process typically takes anywhere from the bidding process and the contract process takes between 60 and 90 days. What would be helpful is if we did an informal process where we got price quotes from contractors and didn't necessarily advertise it, public advertise it. But if we want to, like 3 or 4 different contractors, qualified contractors, and obtain price quotes from them and then entered into.
Are we allowed to do that, under the law?
I don't know. That's a process where I think we need to get the prosecutor to buy into it.
If it's an emergency, that's one thing. What Mr. Roush is describing, at least about taking several weeks to prepare drawings, et cetera, that's not an emergency. He's proposing something I hadn't really given any thought to, and if he wants to submit that to us, we'll review it. But having someone lined up in the event of an emergency still sounds like an emergency to me, that you could go under the emergency exception.
I mean, obviously, our interest is to remedy the situation as fast as we can while following all the laws that we're required to follow to ensure the lowest and best, price
Use of-
for taxpayers, so whatever that needs to look like I would be in support of.
Yeah, obviously, this is the first you've brought to us of this major issue that we've had water main breaks and it happens, but to have the frequency and repetitive nature of those, obviously, there's a systemic problem there that needs to be fixed. Your office has identified that, and you're coming up with a plan of saying, let's not do this kind of halfway. If we're gonna do it, just do it and replace the whole line, correct?
Yes, we want to actually replace the whole line. We don't want to put any more Band-Aids on it. We want to take care of this project. And I'm not quite sure, I'm not saying that this is going to solve everything, because, you know, solving this area, fixing this area may push the breaks to a different location. But we have to replace this line. It's
But there's a
urgent.
nature.
And the reason why we haven't come earlier to you is because we needed to get pricing from contractors. We needed to come up with an alignment. We needed to get certain things done in order to come to you with a solution. I don't want to come to you with just problems. I want to, you know, our department wants to come to you with solutions.
Sure, but if it's a game of whack-a-mole a little bit, right now, the mole is popping up in people's front yards. And if it's pushed somewhere else, then potentially it's open road or what have you. So we
Right.
don't know that
Well, yeah.
right?
So the reason it's so urgent is because this area, the houses are so close. So, you know, anytime you have a main break this close, we're causing potential structural damage. In other
well-
locations, the houses sit farther back, 60 foot away, and so you're not as likely to have structural
Well,
damage.
I don't think we need to keep discussing the macro fix the project. I think you're hearing all three of us say, fix it. You know, whatever that means in the most expeditious way of fixing it, fix it. But then you mentioned there's a couple of specific circumstances with residential homeowners that have had damage?
Yes, there's, in two of these main breaks, one that happened in October, and I think one maybe December, early December, where, and actually the picture here that you see is a situation where, you know, the main broke and the water, you know, went 60 foot in the air, casting rocks out of there and asphalt, and ended up damaging Gus Bunnell's home, and Gus is actually here today, and damaged his home, where water entered into his home and caused damage to the inside of his home.
And how did we address that?
And so we've been working with Gus and working with his insurance company and trying to, you know, figure out what the insurance company is going to cover and what they're not going to cover.
Are we responsible for that, Bruce?
It depends. We have a release process where we typically pay the deductible. So we gotta figure out whether the insurance company is willing to pay and what that deductible is, and we would pay that deductible in exchange for a release.
But
So I'm
then-
familiar with how government has immunity or some immunity, and my family's home burned down, or a large part of it burned down when I was a junior in high school, and the fire department knew, because I lived on a farm, my house was like a third of a mile off the road, they knew that they would have very great difficulty with fire hydrants, and so they planned on bringing a pumper truck and pumping from a large 20,000 gallon cistern we had at our place. Well, their pumper truck was not filled with gasoline, ran out of gasoline, that fire got an hour head start as they tried to clamber, taking pipes all the way out to the fire hydrants, but they're immune. So Bruce, when our things like this, is there some claim to immunity? Because I think we should be completely covering this gentleman.
So,
Is there a problem with covering him?
so we are working with Mr.
There
Bunnell.
is, yeah, our policy is to pay the deductible.
That's it?
Only when there is immunity.
But I thought we had a policy of sometimes in basements, when basements got flooded, that was something that was our fault in sewer situations, that we've covered things like that. Yeah, we don't want someone to be harmed because a public utility broke in front of their house.
There's exceptions to immunity, and water sometimes can meet one of those exceptions. So we have to evaluate these on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
We
I mean,
work with
I've just
we work with
explained.
our I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah,
Commissioner Grossman.
you go ahead, but I mean, I get it. I personally, having experienced government immunity that causes severe damage to our property, and yet there was no recourse I had, my family had none.
But in this case, we've got wiggle room and hopefully we can accommodate and make the person whole, correct?
So the other reason why we haven't come to you is because I was hoping to have more information on Mr. Bunnell's claim. And we've been working with Mr. Bunnell to try to figure out what is the difference that he's not being covered by his insurance. You know, what is that margin? And then we're hoping to present that to you as far as like a recommendation for compensation or not, or talk to the commissioner about that.
So
or
at
the
another
prosecutor
time,
about that.
you're saying you still need to work through some issues before bringing us a proposal on this issue?
Yes. And then there's a second homeowner also that received structural damage, and we've not heard from them yet, so.
And in what period of time do you think you'll have something for us to consider?
I'm hoping, Mr. Bunnell is here and he can probably talk to you about his interaction with his insurance company, but I'm hoping in the next 4 weeks, next month, that we would have something. So,
Very good. Sir, if you'd like to address the board, you know, you can come on up. if
Mr.
you
Bunnell,
would.
come on up, guys. Just state your name and your address.
Okay. Gus Bunnell, 8111 State Route 48. I think mine's the first picture right there. It happened October the 25th.
Really sorry that this happened to you. Shouldn't have.
Right now, the insurance is giving me $22,000,
What's your damage?
$51,000.
Why aren't
But
they
we're
covering
going
the
to
whole
get
thing?
some more money. It's just like if you go on and fix the problem, they'll give you a little bit more money. They want to make sure you use it. And my contractor is almost done, and he give me a bill, and I give it to Chris. And I'm gonna try to get the final payment from State Farm. And we talked to them last week, and they said it should be done by this week sometime.
Okay.
When I get that, I'll give it to, email it to Chris or Jody or whoever, and we'll get that done. I sure appreciate it. I had to take like $18,000 out of my pocket. So far, if State Farm gives me another 11,000, make 33.
So you'll be short about $6,000?
Oh, about 18,000.
Oh, I thought you said it was 51 and they give you 44?
No, they give me roughly 22, then they're gonna give me another 11 when I get the project done, which is almost done. My builder charged me
But we
$51,000.
want to make you whole. There is a doctrine under the law. I mean, of course, we have to
I know
follow
what
the
the-
law. We have to know what, because we don't want to do something that violates the immunity or whatever, but there is another doctrine called the betterment doctrine. And that is, you're entitled to bring you back to the prior state. But if you better yourself, that is like, oh, I had a door that was, you know, oak, but I'm putting in this expensive walnut door, you bettered it. I'm assuming that you've just brought it into the current condition it was before this happened.
Right.
Okay.
Well, sir, you're hearing two things out of the board. Number one, we're gonna fix the entire water main.
Right. It
Which-
needs to be fixed.
Which obviously, and that's a big deal.
And
And then number
3/10.
two, I think you're hearing from all three of us, our intent is to make you whole.
Okay. In 3 months, in 3/10 of a mile, that line has broke 10 times.
Yeah, it's not, okay.
Yeah. It's gotta be replaced.
And the other house has probably got $150,000 of plus damage that you ain't heard from.
Oh, I think we will.
Oh, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming, sir, but yes, we're fixing the line and we'll make you whole. Unless our prosecutor says absolutely can't do it, but we've done stuff before and I think we've got wiggle room. I'm pretty confident in this circumstance.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir, good seeing you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
again, sorry, I mean, this,
No. Thanks,
Okay, so you need us to amend your, project list to include this project at a cost of $750,000?
Yeah, what I'll do is I didn't have a time, but, I'll do a resolution to enter into this project.
You'll bring that to us next week?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
great, excellent,
I think you heard the intent of the board,
Yep.
just,
Very good.
just get it done.
thank you.
Yeah. Very good, I appreciate it. That's all I had today. so
Very good, I think
Thanks.
that's enough.
Appreciate your time. Thank
All
you.
right.
Expensive day.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. See, nothing else on the agenda? Bruce, you got anything?
No, that won't wait.
All right, we are running late for our 911 subcommittee meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Is that?
And yes, thank you all.
Thank you.